President Donald Trump's unprecedented decision to attack 3 Iranian nuclear sites has deepened fears of a widening conflict in the Middle East, as we've seen this evening, Tehran striking a U.S. base in Qatar. Now, the Americans are yet to say how they will respond. What we also know at this stage is that the Iranians are considering closing or disrupting maritime traffic along the Strait of Hormuz. It moves many goods, including millions of barrels of oil daily. Let's talk further then about what would happen if the Iranians did shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Bring in the chairperson of the Maritime Business Chamber here in South Africa, Unathi Sonti. Very good evening to you, Mr. Sonti. Good to have your time. So what would be the consequences if the Iranians did go ahead and shut down the Strait of Hormuz?
Evening, Temegile, and to your listeners, or to the viewers at this time. One of the key things probably that would be an issue should that then happen would be there would be a disruption in terms of the movement of, in particular, the energy side of things, because that the Strait of Hormuz moves mostly oil-related, products. There is little, much movement of containers. So that's the only disruption that it will have. It will have an energy disruption around the world. And I know countries such as, China and India's would deeply be affected should then the strait be closed.
What would happen in South Africa? How dependent are we on the movement of goods through that strait, and how quickly would we run out of supplies, possibly, when you look at crude oil, for instance?
Look, if we look at South Africa in terms of the movement of crude oil, you would note that if we look at the numbers from 2024, South Africa moved, imported around 14 to 16 billion worth of 16 billion rands worth of crude oil from the UAE, the Middle East, Saudi Arabia. And I think mostly now we are relying on Angola, Nigeria, the US. So it won't have that much of an impact, because if we look at the year-on-year numbers in March this year, it looks as if the number of movements, of crude oil from the Middle East has decreased significantly.
And that's the oil aspect. What about other goods? How much of our items at South Africa are going through that strait, and how much of what's destined for our shores also has to use the same shipping lane?
There isn't much that would affect us as South Africa at this stage, except one, some of our seafarers, if they are working for some of those shipping companies that are moving, the fuel cargo in those areas. But because of this is a globally connected type of a business, anything that happens, on the other side, it somehow has a ripple effect. But we all know that the Strait, of Hormuz is one of those, critical choke points. And I think the shipping companies and even the allies of Iran would make sure that nothing like that happens. They may maybe utilize, other avenues to do that, because it will have a dire, consequences to those that are mostly dependent on Iran, right, or Iraq-related activities.
And the likes of the Saudis, for example, who ship a vast amount, in fact, of crude oil, would not take kindly to any action that would disrupt their business. When you look at the Iranians themselves, they export about 1.7 million barrels of crude per day, which would also have to go through that route. So perhaps there is a hope, right, that too, the commercial imperatives for Iran itself might be a reason for caution.
Indeed, that's why I'm saying there is a lot that is relying on that strait. If you note that on a daily basis, there's about 5.5 million barrels that are being moved in that area. So I don't think it's one of those, and it will affect them, Iran as well, very much if should they attempt to do something like that. But you never know. When it's war, it's war. You would rather deal with the dire, consequences later. But I don't think the Saudis, the Chinese would allow for that. And the only...
And Unathi, just in terms of what you referenced earlier about a possible ripple effect, would that likely, where South Africa is concerned and our neighbours, would that likely manifest through cost increases, for example, in the cost of fuel, because the chain in terms of the trade in crude is so interlinked?
Yes, indeed. That's why I was saying, this is a globally connected movement. Those we would feel that because whilst I've seen the numbers growing in terms of our imports, from some of the African countries, even the US, we would definitely feel that. But for so far, and I think even the markets have not really, reacted badly towards this particular now, war that is brewing within that side. But it would have those dire effects. But the key. And of which it becomes a critical thing, especially for this continent, is the fact that the long-term effects of it would be dire for South Africa, because we don't even have, active refineries and, so all those things. And we've got all these projects of ours that talks to oil and gas explorations that, have found or have been stopped due to certain things. So it will have that in a longer effect in the country.
And I wonder, Unathi, if this is a moment, perhaps, as you were saying, with South Africa, where we have inefficiencies in terms of storage, so we're able to build, let's say, bulk supply in case there is a global event like what's now unfolding in the Middle East. Is there a lesson to be taken here, and how quickly would we be able to shore up or build up the sort of resilience that we need in terms of building supply that goes on longer term?
Indeed, it's a wake-up call, but in terms of the turnaround time, okay, one, we know South Africa is established, the South African Oil Company, which will take over, the SAPREF in Durban. In terms of, working or fixing that refinery, I don't know how long is that going to take. Whilst we know we are only reliant on only one refinery, which is in the Western Cape. It's a serious wake-up call, but the most important thing is government's strong point on policy, government's strong point on turnaround time in terms of applications that are there. If you would note and you would go back to the reports around the Operation Pakisa when it comes to the work stream of oil and gas, where we had anticipated by a certain time we would have already started to dig some wells, offshore. That has not happened because of quite a number of challenges that we are faced with the continued court cases that are stopping us. So this is a wake-up call that South Africa needs to, rally and take the baton from what the neighbors are doing in terms of securing the energy future of this country. Otherwise, we would always be standing and be worried when things like this, start to happen. Like, imagine if anything could happen, in Nigeria as well, we would be doomed, as this country. We know right now we are relying on gas from Mozambique, which we know it's going to run out very soon, and we are going. So South Africa's standpoint right now, we are too dependent, from everyone else when it comes to energy. And I think this is indeed a wake-up call that the government needs to do something around it.
Unathi Sonti, really a pleasure to talk to you from the Maritime Business Chamber, chairperson of the chamber. I want to direct those of you watching to the pictures taken a short time ago. We're beginning to see now the moment. There you go. You can see some of those flares over the sky of the Qatari capital, Doha, in the last hour and a half. We're now hearing, in fact, breaking news lines to bring you from the Ministry of Defense in Qatar. They say that the Ministry of Defense says that the Qatari air defenses have managed to successfully intercept a missile attack targeting Al Udeid Air Base. That's an American base on the outskirts of Doha. They say, thanks to God, the vigilance of the armed forces and the precautionary measures taken, the incident did not result in any deaths or injuries. There are stronger words coming from the spokesperson of the Qatari Foreign Affairs Department, who says the state of Qatar strongly condemns the attack that targeted Al Udeid by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. They say they consider this a flagrant violation of the sovereignty of Qatar, and that they ultimately hold, in line with international law, the right to respond in any way that they see fit. I'm paraphrasing there, but Qatar very clear in its condemnation of the launch of these missiles that you and I are looking at this evening, targeting a U.S. military base in the Qatari capital, Doha, this evening, but no injuries or fatalities reported so far.